Lynn Bust is our next speaker. Lynn is from the Desmond Tutu Health Foundation, and Lynn will be talking on the topic Gender-Affirming Care in South Africa, Gender Identity, Desire and Access to Social, Legal and Medical Transition, and HIV Services for Transgender and Gender Diverse People.
Hi, thanks. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Bust, and I am the Research Project Manager for the LGBT Plus Health Division at Desmond Tutu Health Foundation. Pronouns are she, her. And I just want to say I want to commend PATHSA and the organizers of this symposium. The talks have been absolutely fantastic. Really, really enjoyed this. So thank you and happy to be here. So I will be presenting some of the findings from a recent study that our division conducted, titled Gender-Affirming Care in South Africa, Gender Identity, Desire and Access to Social, Legal and Medical Transition and HIV Services for Transgender and Gender Diverse People. Oh no, I lost my shared screen. Can you still see it?
Hi, Lynn. Yes, I can still see it.
Okay, sorry, okay, I got it again. Okay. It doesn't have that red square around it, but I'm hoping that everybody can see it. Okay, so aim and objectives of the study. Our overall aim was to describe access to gender-affirming care and HIV services for transgender and gender diverse populations in both the Western and Eastern Cape, South Africa. Our objectives were firstly to describe the self-identified gender identities of gender non-conforming people, and to then describe for transgender and gender diverse individuals their need and access to social transition, legal transition, non-medical gender affirming practices, psychosocial care, hormone therapy, and surgery. To also describe for transgender and gender diverse individuals their need and access to HIV prevention, testing, and treatment services. And lastly, to identify the barriers and facilitators to accessing these services, so both gender affirming care and HIV services. Our methodology was an exploratory mixed method study. We surveyed 150 trans and gender diverse people in total in both the Western and the Eastern Cape, and this included both people assigned male at birth, typically transgender women or gender diverse and non-binary people, and people assigned female at birth, typically transgender men or gender diverse or non-binary people, and also recognizing that intersex people fit into both of these categories, but are typically assigned either male or female at birth. Our recruitment was through convenient sampling through both our safe space network and social media, and data collection. So this is actually phase one that I'm presenting on today of a two-phase study. So phase one was a quantitative structured survey, and phase two, which is still to be completed, are qualitative focus groups. And we're aiming to further understand gender identities of trans and gender diverse individuals and how this relates to their desire to transition within these groups. And this study has UCT ATREC approval. So data collection and analysis for phase one. We conducted quantitative surveys at our office at Curtis Hospital in East London and at a site in Paarl. Data were initially recorded on paper surveys, which were then translated to REDCap immediately after the interview by the interviewer and quality checked by a second researcher. And once all surveys and quality checks were completed, the data were downloaded and descriptive analyses were completed on Stata 18. And all data in the analysis and write-up are de-identified. So to jump right into the results, because I know that we have limited time. So in total, we had 150 trans and gender diverse respondents. Of those, 111 of the respondents, so 74%, were people assigned male at birth, and 39, so just over a quarter, 26% of those respondents were people assigned female at birth. We had a diverse range in terms of race and age group, and you can see our residents also varied, but we had kind of pockets primarily due to our recruitment network in the Cape Town CBD in Paarl, and we had 20 respondents, so 13% of our respondents were in East London in the Eastern Cape. In terms of their demographics, just to highlight some of the key findings here, 19% of the respondents were homeless, so they lived in shelters, they moved around, or they lived on the streets. and 2/3, sorry, I've just got this box coming up. So 66% of our respondents were also unemployed. In terms of their gender identity, so in total, 6 of our respondents, so 4% identified as male, 6 of our respondents, 4% identified as female, 11% identified as trans men, and 47% identified as trans women, and quite a substantial proportion, so just over 1/3, 34% identified as gender diverse. And that was an umbrella term that included people who identified as non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, agender, and gender non-conforming. And you can see that a proportion of both people assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth were gender diverse. And I think this ties in nicely to what Prof. Garcia said during their talk, kind of around the diversity of these communities, right? That it's not just binary trans men and trans women, but there's a substantial proportion of gender diverse people that need to be included and considered as well. 10 of our respondents were also intersex, and the age of 14 was the median age that respondents realized that they were trans or non-binary. And anecdotally, this is often when they first described having the language to describe or come to terms with their identity. In terms of their appearance or their gender lived in day to day, 14% of respondents lived day to day as men, 49% lived as women, 11% sometimes men, sometimes women, and just over a quarter, 26%, were living day to day as non-binary, genderqueer, or agender. The majority, so 61%, were very comfortable with the word transgender being used to describe them, and 65% of our respondents were either satisfied or very satisfied with their appearance. But despite the satisfaction, there was still an expressed need for gender-affirming care. So the next sections that I will present will be access and desire to different modalities of gender-affirming care. So this is social transition. So out of 150 respondents, 129 of them, so 86%, had explained to friends or family their gender identity. 56% had changed their first name, 89% had changed their pronouns, and 89% had changed their appearance as well. So in total, out of our 150 respondents, 99% of them had done one of these 4 things. So it had undergone some form of social transition. For legal transition, 150 out of 150 respondents, only 6, so 4%, had legally changed their gender marker or their name, and 11 respondents, so 7%, were in progress. Of those who had not legally changed their gender marker or their name, so the remaining 133 respondents, 95 of those, so 71%, wanted to change their gender marker or their name. They just had not gone through that process yet, and that's quite substantial. Similarly, for psychosocial care, 45% of our respondents had received some form of psychosocial care to support their transition, and of those who had not, 77% wanted to. For non-medical gender-affirming practice, we divided these into people assigned female at birth and people assigned male at birth, recognizing the difference between these 2 practices. So of our 39 respondents assigned female at birth, 51% were currently binding their breasts and 36% were packing. And of those who were not, 47% wanted to bind their breasts and 20% wanted to pack. For our 111 respondents who were assigned male at birth, 56% were padding their breasts and 87% were tucking their penis. And of those who were not, 37% wanted to pad their breasts and 21% wanted to tuck their penis. In terms of hormones, again, divided by people assigned female and people assigned male at birth. For people assigned female at birth, 44% of our respondents had taken or currently were taking testosterone, and of those who had not, 50% wanted to. For people assigned male at birth, 22%, so that's relatively low, of our respondents had taken or were currently taking estrogen, And of those who were not, 67% wanted to. So that's about 2/3 of our respondents who had not taken estrogen wanted to. And these statistics were fairly similar for testosterone blockers as well. And lastly, for surgery, and this is fairly interesting as well. So in total, out of our 150 respondents, only 3 respondents had had any form of surgery, and there were 3 people assigned female at birth who had had top surgery. None of our respondents had had bottom surgery, and none of our people assigned male at birth respondents had had top surgery either. For those who had not, 64% of people assigned female at birth wanted top surgery, and only a third, 33%, wanted bottom surgery. For people assigned male at birth, it was around 50% that wanted both top and bottom surgery. So to move on to findings from the HIV section, so we asked questions around HIV testing, prevention, and treatment. 99% of our respondents had had an HIV test at some point in their lives, and 64% of respondents had had a test in the last 6 months. So of the 149 who had had an HIV test, 70% of our respondents were HIV negative, and 28% were HIV positive. In terms of HIV prevention and treatment, for those who were HIV negative, the 104 respondents, 22% of those respondents were currently taking PrEP to prevent HIV. And of those who were not, 53% wanted to. And you can see those results are quite variable between people assigned male at birth. So 71% of those wanted to use PrEP. And people assigned female at birth, only 27% wanted to use PrEP. For the 41 of our respondents living with HIV, 78% of them were currently taking antiretroviral treatment. And for those who were not currently taking antiretroviral treatment, 78% wanted to. Sorry, and I just forgot to point out an important thing here as well in terms of the HIV results. So of the 28% who were respondents living with HIV, 34% of these were people assigned male at birth, but 8% were also people assigned female at birth as well. So to summarize these key findings, our demographics showed a vulnerable population with almost 20% homeless and a very high unemployment rate. The majority of our respondents had socially transitioned or engaged in non-medical gender-affirming practices. The least accessed gender-affirming care were legal transition and surgery. And less than half of our assigned female at birth respondents had access to testosterone, while 22% of AMAB respondents had access to estrogen. So you can see from these findings that there's incredibly limited access to gender-affirming care, particularly legal and surgical transition. So we need to identify ways in which to provide access to legal transition and medical gender-affirming care, and including psychosocial care that's desperately needed for many trans and gender diverse people, but without pathologizing clients. In terms of need for gender-affirming care, so most respondents who had not yet accessed gender-affirming care expressed a desire for legal transition for psychosocial care and gender-affirming hormones. And this is similar to other studies that we found, such as one conducted by Vandermeer et al., that found that 49% of transgender women would like hormones and 44% counseling, but had not yet pursued these options. But the desire or need for surgical transition was a little more nuanced, particularly for our AFAB respondents, where 68% wanted top surgery, but only a third wanted bottom surgery. For AMAB respondents, the desire or the need was similarly around 50% for both top and bottom surgery. And this was similar to other studies done in the US that found that 55% of transgender women would like bottom surgery and only 25% of transgender men. So we need to understand why this need or desire for gender-affirming care varies, particularly for surgery, and the factors that influence this as well. So for example, are people happy with their bodies? Is it mistrust and fear of the health system and accessing that service? Is it affordability? Is it waiting times? Is it a combination of all these different things? So we're hoping that our qualitative focus group discussions in phase 2 will help to give some answers to some of these questions that we're seeing here. And lastly, for HIV, so the HIV prevalence was similar to other national statistics for people assigned male at birth, which is much higher than the general population, and just highlights, that this group is very vulnerable to HIV. But the assigned female at birth HIV prevalence of 8% also indicates a need for further studies to determine accurate HIV prevalence in people assigned female at birth and gender diverse and non-binary people as well, because we don't have a lot of data around this. And lastly, our findings kind of highlighted a difference between HIV prevention and treatment needs for both AMAB and AFAB respondents, and this needs to be explored further. So just some limitations to the study. This was a convenient sampling, and our sample size was also relatively small, so it was not statistically powered, which limits its generalizability. We also self-reported from these survey questions, which may introduce some bias, and we had a relatively small sample size in the Eastern Cape, and we need further studies in understudied and rural areas as well. So,
Lynn, sorry, I'm going to need to stop you there. We've gone over time.
sorry. That's fine. I mean, this is my conclusion, but I'm happy to end it there.